Hi, welcome to Chapter 8, Part 2. Here we're looking at a different, part of the software of information processing. Last video we looked at attention, and in this section we're going to look at memory. What is memory? Memory is the retention of information over time. Having a memory enables you to anchor yourself in continuity. So that means because you have a memory, you're able to know what you're doing now, what you did 10 minutes ago, what you did this morning when you woke up, what you did last week, and also, what happened months ago, years ago, right? So it enables you to have, a story of yourself in your head because you remember all the experiences that you had. The research today focuses to do with memory, focuses mainly on how children actively construct their memory. So we're going to look at this a little bit deeper. So the processes involved in memory is basically getting information into memory. Like, how do you get it in there? When you're studying, how do you get this information into your brain? Retaining information over a long time, how do you make it stay there? And then finally, how do you get it out when you need it? So you're going to study this chapter and study, and then you're going to go and write the test. And how do you access that? Okay, so let's look at these three aspects of memory in more detail. So the first one is getting information into your memory. Now here, attention is key. So what you have to do is encode the information in a way that enables you to get it back. If it's not encoded properly, if you simply read over the chapter sort of lightly and you don't encode it, then when it comes to time to write the test, the information may be in there in your heads, but you don't know where it is. You can't get it back in order to answer the questions. Okay, so encoding consists of 5 processes. There's different ways that you can encode information. The first one is rehearsal, which everybody knows. It's just conscious repetition of something, right? It's just repeating. This is really only good for short term. So, if somebody calls up and leaves like an annoying voicemail with a phone number on it, and you don't have any, like, instead of texting you, and who did that? The plumber did that this morning, and they left the number. And so I had to use rehearsal because I didn't have anything to write it down with and remember the number. And I just repeated it until I could get, dial it myself. Okay, so, and now I don't remember what it was. I think it was maybe 955 something. It's gone. So rehearsal is a really good way of encoding information for a short period of time, and then it's gone. It served its purpose. It was good enough. Okay? So the next type is called deep processing. So there's deep processing versus shallow processing. It's actually on a continuum, right? So let's say shallow processing would be reading over about a theory for something, right? Reading over about it. That would just be shallow. Versus intermediate, you might start to think about it at a slightly deeper level. Give a little bit of meanings to some of the pieces that are in there, or rhyme words, just give it a little bit more than just reading over. And then deep processing would be taking the theory and analyzing it and coming up with examples of the individual pieces. So you're really, really looking into what the meaning of that theory is and what its implications are and how you can use it. Okay, so that's shallow versus deep processing. Obviously, deep takes much longer time to do, but also it's going to give you the best encoding, and you're going to retain that information over a longer period of time. Elaboration means making examples, making unique codes for things. Thinking of examples, thinking of stories, just making, say, the concept or the theory bigger and bigger in your head, with lots of examples or visual images or sounds, anything around it, in order to help you remember that. Constructing mental images sort of falls under elaboration, right? So you're making examples, unique codes for things. So constructing images means you create like a mental image, and you sort of, the example they give in the book is if you don't remember like how many windows you have in a house, right? So you can construct a mental image of the house, and you can look at sort of mentally look in each room and count the windows. Okay. Organization, finally, you can organize information yourself in meaningful ways that's going to help you understand or how to remember things. So actually, this is an example of, hold on one second here. This is an example of organizing, how to organize to help encode information. Okay, and that's why I do it at the beginning of each slide deck, is because we can break it up. You can see that the information processing approach has these, first it always has the explanation, right? But then it has these two important aspects of attention and memory, and then we're going to apply it to expertise and metacognition. So I do this to add organization, to chunk it into different pieces. Also, one strategy that I use for tasks is that I actually kind of visually take a picture of this. So on the test, when I go to talk about information processing and I see these questions, I can sort of close my eyes and I can imagine this slide. There was these different aspects, and it helps me organize the information. Another strategy that they talk about in the text is chunking. As you know, dividing information into chunks of numbers. So here's the example up here for chunking. Instead of remembering, however, these are nine numbers in a row, you can break it up into chunks. And it's easier to remember 3 chunks than it is 9 individual pieces. So now that we've talked about how the information gets into our head, so we've encoded it, right? So now we're going to talk about storage once it's in there. So when we're talking about storage, we're talking about three time frames generally, right? So you've got sensory memory, which retains information for just an instant or a few seconds, right? You barely even know it happened. Then you have short-term memory. It's got a limited capacity. It retains for about 30 seconds unless you do something with it. Okay? Within this short-term memory, this is where the working memory is. Okay? So working memory, 3-part memory, temporary holds work as we're doing it. So it's analogous to, say, a workbench is what they use in the text. Another one you might sort of connect with more is like RAM on your computer. So it's the working space. So it's before it gets into long term. It's between long term and sensory, and it's the workspace. Okay. So from that working memory, it's going to be drawing on things, bringing it out from long term, having new information coming in. It's the workbench. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that. So those are the 3 time frames that it's talking about. So sensory, when it first comes in, very, very quick. Short term, about 30 seconds, and then either it disappears or it gets encoded. And then finally, long-term memory, which is unlimited capacity over a long period of time. Developmental changes in memory span. So this is a study that looked at developmental changes like to do with short-term memory, right? So George Miller, 1956, came out with the magical number 7 plus or minus 2. Okay, so what this is about is this is supposedly the number of digits that a student can remember or retain and say back to you. And typically that is supposed to be 7, average is 7 plus or minus 2 digits. In the data presented here, this is from a study where they looked, there's the age along the bottom, so 2-year-olds up to adults, and then the number of digits that they were able to remember and then say back without error. So you can see here that a 2-year-old, they were able to say 2 digits. 4-year-olds were able to say up to 4 digits. 6-year-olds, maybe 4.5, and then increased over age. Over time and over age. So this is just demonstrating on average how memory span increases with age. Here we have Baddeley's model of working memory. Okay, so it's a pretty good model for demonstrating their theory of how working memory works. How do you use that workbench or that RAM that's in your brain, right, in your memory? So here you have the central executive, so think of that as the boss, right? Then you have the working memory, visuospatial working memory on one side, and then you have the phonological loop. I think I've been doing videos for too long. Working, and they draw from each other. So it's getting information from both the visuospatial and the phono loop. It's also able to draw information from long-term memory and put it back, right? So it's working with information coming from all of these different areas. The research has demonstrated that children's working memory is linked to many different aspects of their development. Children who have better working memory are more advanced in reading comprehension, math skills, and problem solving. Working memory increases significantly from the age of 8 to 24. And there's also some evidence that there are working memory training programs that children can do or teachers can use. And these have been found to be very, somewhat successful in terms of increasing working memory with regards to math, listening, reading, many different faculties. And finally, we have long-term memory. So long-term memory, as we mentioned, holds information in a relatively permanent fashion, okay? There's really no limits. It holds countless number of memories and different information, and it's differentiated based on the contents. So what that means is within long-term memory, we tend to differentiate between procedural memory and declarative memory. Procedural memory is non-declarative knowledge, including skills and cognitive operations. So knowing how to do things, the procedure of doing things. Okay, so procedural memory is like our ability to sit and type on the computer, blah, 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 like that, super fast. Text on your phone without even thinking about it. Ride a bike. Cannot be consciously recollected. So you don't remember necessarily how to do something, like how you learn to do something, really. It's just something that you automatically do. So that's procedural versus declarative memory. So declarative memory is conscious recollection of information. So you're intentionally remembering, drawing it out of storage. There's specific facts or events. So episodic memory, retention of where, when. So the first day of school, the first time when I tried to learn to snowboard, high school graduation, different, whatever that might be. Okay, so that's episodic memory. I remember that because it's like different episodes in my life. Okay, so specific retention of where and when. Semantic memory is general knowledge about the world. So that's just general learned information. Geography, history, like general information just about the world. Yeah, so those are the differences of those two. This is the Atkinson and Shriven's theory of memory, the memory model, right? It's pretty simple, but it sort of helps with memory, remembering how to do this. So here we have sensory memory, the three pieces: sensory, short-term, and long-term. Sensory input comes in for a fleeting second, right? You attend to it, it goes into short-term memory. It's going to stay in short-term memory for about 30 seconds unless you do something with it. You can, and that's where this rehearsal is. If you want to rehearse it, you want to intentionally code that information, but you must do something. If you do something, it's going to be stored into your long-term memory. So your short-term memory, again, is the workbench. It is, well, within short-term memory is working memory. They don't have that here. So you could draw from long-term memory information that you need to work on your workbench or your RAM, whatever it is you want to say. You also have more information coming in here. This is their basic model of memory. It does say in one of the critiques is that it's too simple, but it's just a simple diagram, and I think it lays it out fairly clearly, but it is a very simple diagram. Representing information in memory. So here they talk about how do we represent that information. These are two very different theories, okay? Network theories and schema theories. Sorry, network theories and schema theories. Network theory has nodes, and it's sort of, I mean, as you can see in the text, it's like you've got pet or versus food. It's like a mental image with nodes, and things are connected, and the distance between one piece of the memory network and another piece, how do I say that? I wish I had a slide up right now where you could be looking at this. Okay, I'm going to try this again. So it is a hierarchical representation, and everything is connected by nodes. So if you look at bird is connected to canary, and bird is connected to parrot, because that's what you would think of first, right? Later, like further down, it's also connected to pet. So the further away it is, the less connected it is to that item. And the example that they give there, and this makes sense. If I said a bird, you might say canary or robin. You're very much less likely to say ostrich, even though ostrich is a bird, right? So the closer those items are to the main category, the faster you're going to recall them. Schema theories are much more popular in research. Okay, so schema theories are stating that you already have a library of information in your brain. You've already got this humongous library. So when you get new information in, you aren't putting it on a node somewhere. You are taking that information and you are putting it into your schema, into an existing schema that already exists. So that's how you're organizing new information that comes in, and that is how it's remembered. So if I say to you, you see a robin for the first time, you learn about a robin, you're going to put it in the file under birds, right? And then when I say, okay, show you a picture of an ostrich, and I'm like, okay, and in your bird file you have ostrich, reverse. In your bird file you have robin, blue jay, chickadee, and those are okay. They kind of look the same, right? And now I tell you that ostrich gets to go in there too. Ostrich is a bird. So now you have to change your schema a little bit to allow for the fact that birds can look different. Birds can have long legs. Birds can be 10 feet tall. Anyways, this also accounts for the fact, because we change things when we put them into our memories, when we put them into our existing schemas, we do change things a little bit. And that's what it means when they're saying tell a story. All students take notes and retell the story, and it's not exactly the same, because it is not 100 in your memory is not a 100% true representation of what went in there. It did change a little bit, right? It also talks about, and here we have schemas, concept, knowledge, or information about events that already exist in the mind and influence the way we encode information. So schemas, that's your library. The last section we're going to be talking about is retrieval and forgetting. So retrieval is taking it out of long-term memory. Okay, so when it comes time to writing the your test or anything like that, retrieval is the process of accessing the information that you need, right? So that depends on a lot of things. Sometimes you can access things just automatically with no effort, and then sometimes it does require effort, right? You have to try to remember what was the answer to that, right? So sometimes it's automatic, sometimes it's purposeful, but a big part of this is how you encoded it, and when the information was encoded. This is going to make more sense as we go, okay? The first is serial position. So what this states is that recall is better for items at the beginning and the end of a list, right? So if I asked you to memorize like 15 items, you memorize the 15. Recency effect is the fact that you're probably going to remember the last 4 or 5 items on that list easily. Primacy effect is that next you're going to remember the first few that you tried to remember, right? You will have the least recall for the items on the list that like 6, 7, 8, 9, right in the middle there, 10. And that's the same for many things. I mean, the example is a list, but from, say, a lecture, if you were to go to a 3-hour lecture, you're going to remember the end of the lecture first. You will remember the beginning of the lecture second. And the stuff in the middle, you will remember the least. So that is called the serial position effect. And along with that is the recency effect and the primacy effect. Encoding specificity. When it comes to retrieval, the better you encoded the information, the easier it's going to be to find it. Okay, so if you simply used, it says here, associations formed at the time of learning form effective cues. So if in reading this chapter, you just read over the chapter and repeated a few things to yourself, that is very weak encoding, as we know. However, if in going through this chapter, you read each piece and you gave meaning to each piece and you thought of examples for each piece and how it relates to your life. Think of a time where you may have experienced this, or an example of where you could, this effect here. So the better you encode information, the easier it is going to be retrieved. Recall retrieval is retrieve previously learned information, like filling in the blank. So you're recalling the information. Recognition identifying, that is it's just to identify learned information, such as what you see on multiple choice tests. All right. We're almost there. We're at 24 minutes. We've just got a few minutes left in memory, and we'll be concluding this video. So lastly, we have forgetting. So cue-dependent forgetting, caused by lack of effective retrieval cues. So you're on a test, you're trying to figure something out, you know the information, and you can't find it in your head. Okay? Lack of effective retrieval cues. Interference theory, other information, new or old, gets in the way of what we're trying to remember. You probably, this is evident, say, when you're studying for exams. Okay, when it comes studying for exams, if you've got an exam like this test is on the Monday, right? So you should organize your study schedule such that Sunday should be reserved, or at least the last half of Sunday should be reserved for studying for this test. Because you want studying for this test to be the last thing you study before you come in to write the test. You do not want to study this and then switch over to policy or whatever else you're taking, history, some other subject, study that after and then come in to write this test, because then you will likely will experience interference. So studying that other topic interferes with your ability to remember facts that you need for this test, right? Decay theory, passage of a time allows for memory trace to... So this is just saying that over time, memory traces do start to fade. So it decays, so over time, you start to forget things. That happened a long time ago. Strategies for improving memory. We've already talked about a lot of these things in terms of like encoding and I mean, the biggest thing is encoding, right? But promote understanding of the material. So that's process it at a very, very deep level and give examples in your own life that you can relate to. You can give visual images. You can draw sort of mental maps of how things go together. Vary instructional information and link early and often. Yeah, I mean, try to understand things from different perspectives, coming from different angles, so that you have multiple ways of looking at something. Assist organization of knowledge. We talked about that with the mental maps, or with how I chop up the chapter. Teach mnemonics. They've got some different memory methods here. Method of loci, rhymes, acronyms, and keywords. You can take a look at that in your text. Strategies for improving memory. Embed memory retrieval language. Give students use of distributed practice. Give students practice tests. Encourage them to take the tests. Encourage students to engage in elaborate interrogation. Basically, teach them these things. Teach them about encoding. Teach them about all the different ways of encoding information. Right? Teach them about shallow versus deep and what are the benefits of doing both. Teach them that deep processing and elaboration take a lot longer, but you'll only have to do it once and you will be able to retrieve it. Right? Oh, and then we get into expertise, which is the last section. Let me see here. Finally, expertise and metacognition, and we will be doing that in the next video. See you there.